The crypto boys have crawled back away to their PlayStations. Speculative and greedy dealers have caved in and cut their losses on depreciating stock that they were holding to one side, and the general watch buying public have finally now wised up to ignoring the Instagram driven watch hype and fear of missing out. So now we have relative serenity on the secondary watch market, with prices generally flattening out and becoming more predictable. That's how it would seem, anyway. And that is very much the case for the most highly demanded and wanted watches, the stainless steel and sports Rolexes, for example. Datejust GMTs and Submariners. These are watches with very high market liquidity, meaning there's just lots of data out there that proves these watches are being traded en masse, which means that we can have relative confidence in the market efficiency for those models. The price you are seeing those watches advertised at is not actually far off their real market value, because there's plenty of recently sold published listings for those watches available for the public to see. What I want to warn you guys about though, however, is models from Rolex, AP and Patek Philipe that, as a watch dealer myself, I'm not seeing that too much market activity for. So yes, here's me, a watch dealer, about to tell you guys about the watches that I believe are still in a bubble. And these are absolutely the ones that I am openly and honestly advising my clients may still fall in value, or are perhaps latent in reacting to that overall downward market trend that we've seen over the past 6 months. So why am I bringing this up then? Well, I had a client a few weeks back that actually approached me wanting to source a Patek Philippe Aquanaut, and I've got to be honest, I had a look at the market and was assimilating the values of what I could find for him. I couldn't really believe that prices were still, for the 5167A, sitting at around 58 to 60,000 for an unworn model, and to me that didn't seem like that much of a drop really from the peak of values back in March. But what also struck me about this is that I have seen a few dealers that have had one or two of these in stock for quite a while now. In fact, I know of one particular YouTuber who's had one of these Patek Philippe Aquanauts for the most part of 2022, and for love nor money can't sell the thing. The reality is that there just isn't any demand in the market for that type of model, and therefore how can we be sure that the market prices that are being quoted for that at 58 to 60 for a brand new unworn one are actually realistic? Now, if there is stock that has been available for several months, or in that case of the YouTuber I mentioned before, at least 9 months of the year, which means that that was purchased at an inflated price, which absolutely isn't a reflection of the trade value now, meaning that he's still trying to somehow get a profit margin on top of that to realise his end user price. Now the problem is, because there aren't really that many of these watches about, the 5167A listings online in the UK, there's not that many of them, certainly not relative to Rolex stainless steel models, there's not enough competition there to drive the prices back down again, which is what's happened with Rolex. Because of that, dealers who are buying new stock are simply listing them at the same price as what those other guys who've had them listed them online for several months, which means that's actually not really a true reflection of where the market is currently at. Let's talk about Rolex then, and the Oyster Perpetual line. Now, as we know, the coral red dial, the yellow dial and the so-called Tiffany blue dial were discontinued from the 41mm range a few months back. Now, what we've seen in prices, of course, as with all others, they have come down. However, they don't seem to have come down that much, certainly in comparison to GMTs, Submariners and Datejusts. We know with the Tiffany, is this really a £22,000 watch? This is a watch that at retail, when it was being sold at retail, was valued at $4,995. Now, 4 or 5 times over the retail still to me seems a bit ridiculous. Whilst this was the hottest watch of 2021, I'm not really getting that many clients who are asking after them anymore. Perhaps people aren't interested anymore. It is no longer the flavour of the month. And of course, it doesn't even have a Tiffany signature on the dial, it is just a colour, so the Tiffany Rolex has always been a little bit of a misnomer anyway. So I wonder how long it can actually continue to sustain that 4 to 5 times what was the original retail price. And then obviously we go on to the other two colours that were discontinued, the yellow dial and the coral red. And I've been watching the market now for several months, and I'm still seeing they're sitting at around 16,000 for an unworn example. That seems strange because that hasn't moved in price at all in the last 4 or 5 months. At the peak of March, they were valued at 18 to 19,000 and sank down to 16,000, and that only represents a 15% fall, whereas the majority of other Rolex models have fallen by over 20%, so you could say maybe it's still got 5 to 10% to fall there. And the final one for Rolex for me is the Rolex Daytona with the black and white dial, aka the Panda. This is the post 2016 model. And now the reason I bring this watch up is because it experienced not just one spike in price along with everything else between January and March, but also a first spike in price that happened way before that. In fact, a year before that, between February to April 2021. This was a £20,000 watch before then, and even after the decline of the past 6 months, an unworn one still sits at £30,000 on the secondary market. And what's alarming for me with this particular model, the white dial, is that lots of dealers that I know actually are not holding these watches in stock, which is alarming because it demonstrates a lack of confidence from those dealers in the current general asking price of that watch. And if there is that lack of confidence there, then there's not that much liquidity going on in the market, not much buying and selling going on, which means there's risk there that the price could correct even further. So personally, I don't see the Panda Daytona as a £30,000 plus watch in unworn condition. I can see this dropping to around 25, 26,000 with the black dial potentially at 22, 23,000. That makes a lot more sense. That's still significantly higher than where it stood back in 2021. And that leads me smoothly on to Audemars Piguet and the Royal Oak, because very much of what applies for that Panda Daytona, whereby there are lots of dealers who are not holding them in stock. The situation is similar with the AP Royal Oak. Now, there are also lots of dealers that I know who are not touching AP Royal Oaks with a barge pole at the moment because there just appears to be too much volatility in price for that particular model. And obviously, there is, as with that Panda, a general market hesitancy and lack of confidence in their current asking prices. So, for example, a 15500 ST with blue dial are around £55,000 still on the secondary market, and I know that that is seen by many dealers in the industry to be still too much, and therefore it's too risky for them to tie up their capital to hold those in stock, and therefore they're only sourcing them for clients if they ask them to. Now, if there is that lack of market confidence from dealers, then that may mean that a correction is still to come on those. That applies for the 41mm, I would say, in all colours, the 15500 ST, the 15400 ST, and also the 15450 and 15550, which of course are the 37mm sizes. So I hope that was useful, guys. If you were thinking about purchasing any of those watches that I mentioned in this video, as I said, don't be dissuaded by anything that I've said there. Dealers will still be happy to source for you any of those models, and of course, if you really want the watch and you can afford it, go ahead and buy it. But as I say, my job with my clients is to advise them how best to spend their money if they care about the investment value of that watch and the value retention. If I believe that you may still lose a few £1,000s on that, I'm telling my client that openly and honestly, because that's how I do things at Beat the Waitlist. So guys, please go check out my website, beatthewaitlist-watches.com. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.